The air was thick with the scent of pine and the distant hum of cicadas as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting Willow Creek, North Carolina, in a twilight haze. It was the kind of small town where everyone knew your name, your parents' names, and probably what you had for breakfast. Nestled in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains, it was a place where summer nights felt eternal, where 4th of July celebrations brought out folding chairs, fireflies, and the kind of community spirit that made you forget the world could be anything but kind. But on July 4th, 2024, the town's idyllic veneer would crack, leaving a scar that would haunt its residents for years to come. My name is Caleb Monroe, and I've lived in Willow Creek my whole life. At 29, I was the kind of guy who blended into the background, tall enough to be noticed, but quiet enough to be forgotten. I worked as a mechanic at my uncle's garage, fixing pickup trucks and the occasional tractor, my hands perpetually stained with grease. I wasn't one for big crowds or loud parties, but when my cousin Lila invited me to her annual 4th of July bonfire, I couldn't say no. Lila was the opposite of me. Vibrant, magnetic, the kind of person who could convince a room full of strangers to sing karaoke. Her bonfires were legendary, drawing folks from Willow Creek and beyond, a mix of locals, college kids home for the summer, and the occasional out-of-towner looking for a taste of small-town charm. The bonfire was set up on the edge of her family's property, a sprawling 10 acres that backed up to the creek, for which the town was named. The water ran shallow and clear, reflecting the stars on a good night, though it could turn murky and treacherous after a storm. That evening, the sky was cloudless, the air warm but not stifling, and the promise of fireworks hung like a shared secret among the crowd. I arrived early, around 5 p.m., to help Lila set up. She was in her element, directing a small army of friends to arrange coolers, string fairy lights, and stack firewood. Her boyfriend, Ethan, a wiry guy with a quick laugh and a knack for grilling, was manning the barbecue, the smell of charred burgers and hot dogs mingling with the pine. "Caleb, you gonna actually talk to someone tonight, or you just here to brood?" Lila teased, tossing me a beer from the cooler. Her hazel eyes sparkled with mischief, her blonde hair pulled into a messy bun that somehow looked intentional. "I talk," I said, cracking open the can. "Just not as loud as you." She laughed, a sound that carried over the chatter of the arriving guests. "You're hopeless. At least try to have fun, okay? It's a holiday." I nodded, though I wasn't sure I'd keep that promise. Crowds made me itchy, and I preferred the company of engines to people. Still, I stuck around, helping haul chairs and passing out drinks as the party grew. By 7 p.m., the field was alive with nearly 100 people. Kids chasing each other with glow sticks, couples swaying to the music blaring from a portable speaker, and groups clustered around the bonfire, its flames licking the darkening sky. The creek babbled in the background, a soothing counterpoint to the laughter and clinking bottles. That's when I noticed her. She was standing near the edge of the crowd, alone, holding a red Solo cup, but not drinking from it. She was striking, not in the polished way Lila was, but in a raw, unassuming kind of beauty. Her dark hair fell in loose waves over her shoulders, and her eyes, even from a distance, seemed to catch the firelight in a way that made them glow. She wore a simple white sundress, out of place among the denim shorts and tank tops of the other guests. And her posture was stiff, like she wasn't sure she belonged. I figured she was one of the out-of-towners, maybe a friend of a friend dragged along for the night. I didn't approach her right away. I'm not that guy. Instead, I busied myself with restocking the cooler, stealing glances when I thought she wouldn't notice. But then, Lila caught me staring. "Who's that?" I asked, nodding toward the woman as casually as I could manage. Lila squinted, then shrugged. "No clue. Probably someone Ethan invited. He's got friends from all over." She nudged me. "Go say hi. She looks like she could use a friend." I rolled my eyes, but didn't argue. Something about the woman drew me in. Not just her looks, but the way she seemed to exist on the periphery, observing rather than participating. It reminded me of myself. So, after another beer for courage, I made my way over. "Having fun?" I asked, immediately cringing at how lame it sounded. She turned, her eyes locking onto mine, and for a moment, I felt like she was looking straight through me. "It's lively," she said. Her voice, soft but clear, with a hint of an accent I couldn't place. Maybe Midwestern, maybe something else. "I'm not used to this many people." "Me neither," I admitted, leaning against a nearby table. "I'm Caleb, Lila's cousin." "Evelyn?" she said, offering a small smile. "I'm a friend of a friend. Sort of." "Sort of?" I raised an eyebrow, hoping to keep the conversation going. She hesitated, then laughed lightly. "It's complicated. I'm just passing through." We talked for a while, longer than I expected. She was guarded but curious, asking me about Willow Creek, the garage, my life. I told her about the time I rebuilt a '67 Mustang for a guy who paid me in homemade moonshine, and she laughed. A real laugh, not the polite kind. In return, she shared that she was a photographer, traveling the country to capture forgotten places. She didn't elaborate, and I didn't push. There was something about her that felt fragile, like a glass figurine you're afraid to touch. As the night wore on, the party grew rowdier. Fireworks lit up the sky, their booms echoing off the mountains. Evelyn and I drifted closer to the creek, away from the noise, sitting on a fallen log with our feet dangling near the water. The air was cooler there, the fire's heat replaced by the damp chill of the creek. She told me about abandoned barns she'd photographed in Iowa, gas stations in Nevada, a church in Louisiana with a tree growing through its roof. Her voice was hypnotic, painting pictures I could almost see. "You ever think about leaving Willow Creek?" she asked, her eyes on the water. "Sometimes," I said, "but this place has roots. Hard to pull them up." She nodded, like she understood, but there is a sadness in her expression that made me wonder what she was running from. Before I could ask, a shout from the bonfire pulled our attention. Ethan was waving me over, holding a sparkler and grinning like an idiot. "Caleb, get over here, man. We're doing shots." I glanced at Evelyn, who smiled faintly. "Go on," she said. "I'll be here." Reluctantly, I joined Ethan and the others, downing a shot of something that burned like regret. When I looked back toward the creek, Evelyn was gone. I figured she'd wandered off to grab a drink or use the bathroom, but something about her absence felt wrong, like a chord struck out of tune. I scanned the crowd, but she was nowhere. Her red solo cup sat on the log, untouched. The rest of the night passed in a blur of laughter and music, but I couldn't shake the unease. By midnight, the party was winding down, and Lila was herding the stragglers toward their cars. I helped clean up, stacking chairs and tossing empty cans into a trash bag. But my mind was on Evelyn. I asked around, but no one knew her. Not Ethan, not Lila, not even the college kids who seemed to know everyone. It was like she'd never been there. I drove home, the roads dark and empty, the mountains looming like silent sentinels. My apartment above the garage was quiet, the kind of quiet that amplifies your thoughts. I couldn't sleep, replaying our conversation. The way her eyes had seemed to hold secrets she wasn't ready to share. The next morning, I texted Lila, asking if she'd heard from anyone named Evelyn. She hadn't. Neither had Ethan. I even checked social media, searching for her name, but found nothing. It was as if she'd vanished into the night. A week later, I was back at the garage, elbow deep in a Chevy's engine, when Sheriff Danvers stopped by. He was a grizzled man in his 50s, with a mustache that looked like it belonged in a western. He wasn't one for small talk, so when he asked to speak with me privately, my stomach twisted. "Caleb, you were at Lila's bonfire, right?" he asked, leaning against the workbench. "Yeah," I said, wiping my hands on a rack. "Why?" He pulled out a small notebook. "We got a missing person report. Girl named Evelyn Harper, 27, dark hair, about 5'6". Last seen in Willow Creek on the 4th. Her family says she was traveling through, might have stopped at a local event." My heart sank. "I met her," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "At the bonfire. We talked for a while, then she was gone." Danvers' eyes narrowed. "You sure it was her?" I described her. Her dress, her accent, the way she talked about photography. He nodded, jotting down notes, and asked me to come to the station to give a formal statement. As I followed him in my truck, my mind raced. How could someone vanish from a crowded party? And why didn't no one else remember her? At the station, I recounted everything, the conversation, the creek, the moment she disappeared. Danvers listened, his face unreadable, then showed me a photo. It was her. Evelyn Harper, smiling in a snapshot that looked like it was taken at a family picnic. Her eyes were the same, bright and haunted. "We found her car," Danvers said. "Parked off Route 19, about 2 miles from Lila's place. No signs of a struggle, but her camera and backpack were gone. Phone's off, no signal to trace." I felt like I'd been punched. "You think something happened to her? We don't know," he admitted. "Could have run off. Could have been taken. We're looking into it." Over the next few days, I couldn't focus. Work felt meaningless. The hum of the garage drowned out by the questions in my head. Why had Evelyn been at the bonfire? Who was the friend of a friend she'd mentioned? And why did I feel like I was missing something crucial? I started driving by Route 19 at night, hoping to spot something the police had missed. The road was a lonely stretch, flanked by dense forest and the occasional deer crossing sign. Her car was gone, towed to the impound lot. But I kept going back, drawn to the spot like a moth to a flame. One night, about 2 weeks after the bonfire, I saw something. It was late, maybe 1 a.m., and the road was shrouded in fog. My headlights caught a glint of metal in the ditch, a camera lens, half buried in the mud. I pulled over, my heart pounding, and retrieved it. It was a Nikon, scratched but intact, with a memory card still inside. I didn't know if it was Evelyn's, but it felt like a sign. Back home, I plugged the memory card into my laptop. The photos were stunning. Abandoned buildings, desolate landscapes, each frame capturing a kind of quiet despair. But the last few images were different. They were taken at the bonfire. There was Lila, laughing by the fire. Ethan, flipping a burger. A group of kids with sparklers. And then a photo of me, sitting on the log by the creek, looking at something off camera. My breath caught. I hadn't seen her take it. The final photo was blurry, like it had been taken in motion. It showed a figure. A man, maybe, in a dark jacket, standing near the tree line. The image was too grainy to make out his face, but something about it sent a chill down my spine. I called Danvers and handed over the camera, explaining where I'd found it. He didn't say much, but I could tell he was rattled. The investigation picked up after that. Danvers brought in a state police detective, a woman named Alvarez who specialized in missing persons. She interviewed me again, this time with a sharper edge, asking if I'd noticed anyone suspicious at the party. I hadn't, but I mentioned the photo of the man in the jacket. Alvarez's eyes flickered with interest, and she promised to look into it. Meanwhile, Willow Creek was changing. The bonfire had been the talk of the town, but now it was a ghost story. People whispered about Evelyn, about how she'd come to town and vanished without a trace. Some said she'd run off with a boyfriend. Others swore she'd been snatched by a drifter. Lila stopped hosting parties, her usual spark dimmed by guilt. Ethan threw himself into work, avoiding the creek altogether. And me? I couldn't let it go. I started digging, asking questions, piecing together what I could. I learned that Evelyn had been staying at a motel on the edge of town, the kind of place truckers and tourists used for a quick night's sleep. The clerk remembered her, said she'd checked in alone but had a visitor the night before the bonfire. A man, late 30s, with a scar on his cheek. The clerk couldn't recall his name, but he'd paid in cash and left before dawn. I passed the information to Alvarez, who cross-referenced it with local surveillance footage. She found nothing, but the detail stuck with me. A man with a scar. A man in a dark jacket. Months passed, and the case grew cold. Evelyn's family came to town, posting flyers and holding a vigil by the creek. I went, standing at the back, feeling like an imposter. Her mother, a frail woman with Evelyn's eyes, thanked me for talking to her daughter that night, for giving her a moment of connection before she disappeared. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, my throat tight. Then, in October, a break. A hiker found a backpack in the woods about 5 miles from Route 19. It was Evelyn's, identified by the monogram tag. Inside were her wallet, a notebook, and a single photo. A Polaroid of the creek, taken at dusk, with a shadow in the corner that looked like a person. Alvarez called me in to look at it, and I confirmed it matched the style of the photos on her camera. But the notebook was what shook me. It was filled with sketches and notes, cryptic phrases about watching eyes and the man who waits. One page had a drawing of a face, a man with a scar on his cheek. I started having nightmares after that. I'd see Evelyn by the creek, her dress glowing in the moonlight, her eyes pleading for help. I'd wake up sweating. The image of that scarred man burned into my mind. I knew I was in too deep, but I couldn't stop. I started combing the woods myself, looking for anything, clothing, footprints, anything that might lead to her. The townsfolk thought I was crazy, but Lila supported me, even joining me on a few searches. We found nothing, but the act of looking felt like defiance, like a refusal to let Evelyn become another forgotten story. In December, I got a call from Alvarez. They'd found him, the man with the scar. His name was Victor Crane, a drifter with a rap sheet for petty theft and assault. He'd been spotted in a nearby town, trying to sell a camera that matched the description of Evelyn's. When they brought him in, he denied everything, claiming he'd found the camera in a pawn shop. But his story fell apart when they found a photo in his wallet. A Polaroid of Evelyn, taken at the bonfire, her face lit by the fire's glow. Crane's arrest didn't bring closure. He refused to talk, and without a body, the police couldn't charge him with murder. They held him on theft and suspicion, but it felt like a hollow victory. Evelyn was still gone. Her fate, a question mark that hung over Willow Creek like a storm cloud. I visited the creek one last time, on the anniversary of the bonfire, and left a small stone by the water, a marker for a woman I barely knew, but couldn't forget. The town moved on, as towns do. Lila started hosting parties again, though they were smaller, quieter. Ethan proposed to her, and I was happy for them, even if I felt like a piece of me was still stuck in that night. I kept Evelyn's memory alive in my own way, framing one of her photos, the one of me by the creek, and hanging it in my apartment. It was a reminder that some mysteries don't get solved, that some people slip through the cracks and leave only questions behind. I still drive by Route 19 sometimes, half expecting to see her standing there, camera in hand, capturing the world's forgotten corners. I don't know if I'll ever get answers, but I know I'll keep looking, because sometimes that's all you can do when the truth is just out of reach.